Welcome to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at the Gravel Bar in Eureka Springs. Producer Zeek Taylor and co-producer Sandra Spotts welcome guest storytellers Linda Packham and Flake, with guest musician Mick Byrd. The following was recorded June 3rd, 2026. And now here's Sandra Spotts to begin the program.
I know you've been entertained a little while by this gentleman over here, so I will tell you who he is. This is Mick Byrd, and the Missouri Ozarks is both home and backdrop to Missouri Arts Council touring performer Mick Byrd. A member of the Missouri Blues Society and Tennessee Songwriters Association International, Mick has performed at the legendary Bluebird Cafe and songwriter venues in Nashville for over 20 years. An award from Billboard magazine kicked off his music career in 1994. 11 recordings later, Mick brings fans an amazing array of original roots rock, country, and his signature Ozark blues. Mick performs solo or with some of his very talented musician friends as a duo or a band. Whether in his travels across Missouri, the United States, or Ireland, people everywhere find common ground in Mick's music. Mick Byrd.
There's no black, no white, but it's just the blues.
Zeek Taylor is the recipient of the Arkansas Governor's Arts Award for Lifetime Achievement. Best known as an award-winning visual artist, he's also an author, a storyteller, and a public speaker. He's performed on the national public radio show Tales from the South. A StoryCorps interview with Zeek is on file in the Library of Congress, and a segment of the interview airs on NPR's morning show. A suite is dedicated in Zeek's honor at the Writers' Colony of Dairy Hollow. He's an author who is staying in that lovely suite. Zeek is the author of 4 books. His latest book, Out of the Delta, the Anthology, is a collection of autobiographical short stories and was released nationwide by Sandy Springs Press. A documentary about Zeek is currently in production by an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. We're excited about this. The documentary that is currently in the final creative editing phase is scheduled for release in the near future. Here's my friend Zeek.
Thank you, Sandra. This is a very short story, and it was the second story I ever read in public. I'll get to the first one later on. This is also in the first chapter of my book, Out of the Delta, the Anthology. From the moment that I was old enough to open the kitchen door, I would let myself out and go into the backyard to visit with the dogs and cats. The cats lived in the yard and slept in one of several outbuildings. In the winter, they slept underneath the house by the floor furnace. Our house sat on concrete piers, and the house was underpinned with corrugated metal skirting. My daddy left one small opening in the skirting for access to the bottom of the floor furnace so the cats could get in there and keep warm. From the moment that I was old enough to open the kitchen door, I would let myself out and go into the backyard to visit with the dogs and cats. The cats lived in the yard, and my family had small house dogs and also had a couple of large dogs that lived in the backyard. Even though the yard was not fenced, they rarely ventured far enough away, and they were always excited to see me when I came out the back door. They knew not to jump on me, but to show affection, they licked my face. I would giggle. More than once, my mother caught me bending over the dog's food bowl and sharing their meal. When I got older, it was my job to carry out food to the dogs. Around the age of 4, I went outside to feed them and I asked my daddy's bird dog, Tip, do you want the red bow or the green bow? Chip answered, the green bow. I threw the dog bows in the air, ran into the house to tell my mother that old Tip could talk. Even though I tried, I could never get the bird dog to speak again. A couple years later, my father confessed that he had been in the backyard in the outhouse that morning and he had answered for Tip. I wish he hadn't told me. Our next speaker is going to be my co-producer, Sandra Spotts. Sandra Spotts was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, where she wrote and illustrated her first work at the age of 6. It was titled, I Want to Be a Movie Star. While she never achieved that goal, she is living a better dream, painting, writing, and hosting Homegrown Tales in Eureka Springs. Those early dreams led to earning a degree in art with a minor in English at the University of Arkansas. She taught elementary and junior high art for 15 years while practicing weaving and sculptural basketry. One of her works is part of the permanent collection at the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts in Little Rock. As project designer for a national publishing company, she designed prototypes for home decor and craft books. She wrote for several state lifestyle magazines and worked as an interior designer for many years. 12 appearances on the internationally broadcast NPR program Tales from the South led to publication of a story in the anthology Best of Tales from the South. And she is a great storyteller. Here's my friend Sandra Spotts.
I have read this story previously, but I thought it deserved another telling in honor of the anniversary of Route 66. It's called Arkies Go West. It was 1959, and I figured in my 10-year-old head this was probably the most exciting thing my parents had ever done. The bags were packed, the cooler was full, and we were setting out for a family adventure on the Mother Road, Route 66. Daddy, a salesman, must have had a good year because a few weeks before the trip, he came home with a shiny new two-tone Chevy with the latest luxury and air conditioner. The only thing he could have done better was to have bought a convertible. But had Mr. Frugal done that, Mama would have canceled the trip and had him committed, certain that he had plunged off the deep end. We were headed for California, the ultimate 50s vacation. In those post-Dust Bowl, post-war days, it seemed that every native Arkansan had relatives transplanted to California who needed to be visited. The phrase, y'all come, every Southerner knows, really means bye-bye. But nobody said it couldn't be taken literally when the time was right, and our time had arrived. We set out to visit Daddy's youngest brother, who had joined the military during the war, and upon discharge made the no-brainer choice of a California lifestyle over returning to the depressed cotton fields of northeastern Arkansas. Seems that having smarts runs in our family. Uncle Joe had married, had my cousins, whom I'd seen only once during their brief trip back home, so there was some catching up to do. On departure day, we backed down the driveway in our cool new ride before daybreak, with the aroma of fried chicken wafting out from under the tablecloth, covering the picnic basket. We hadn't made it out of the state before we were all clutching a napkin-wrapped leg, wing, or thigh. By the time we pulled into the roadside park, all the chicken we had left was the neck, gizzard, and a couple of those other gross parts that kids wouldn't dare touch. No such thing as fast food existed, so we had to make do with Vienna sausages, Velveeta, and potato sticks for days. Sister and I could barely contain ourselves because our parents had agreed to drop us off at the entrance to Disneyland while they visited another transplanted relative. Fortunately for us, in those days, a family with modest means could afford tickets without having to decide which kid they would sell in order to buy tickets for all the rest. Mama had made a curious addition to the itinerary, a stop in La Jolla to visit a boyfriend before Daddy, about whom we had heard way too much. I'm not sure whether Daddy agreed to the stop because he figured he had held up better than Paul and wanted to show off, or since theirs was a volatile marriage, he thought maybe there could be a chance Paul might take her off his hands. Either way, when we arrived, it was an awkward situation for us kids. After a few hours on the road, the novelty of oil wells and tumbleweeds had worn off, so I tortured my family with imitations of the South Texas radio shows, twangy DJs, the fire and brimstone preachers, and cowboy songs sung off key by my alter ego, Rex Titter. About an hour into my performance, the ungrateful bunch I lived with all yelled at me to knock it off. My pouting only lasted about 20 miles. Sister and I then resorted to noting license plates and keeping count of cars with and without radiator water bags. And if you're under 60, we'll explain later. Finally, the next day, after a stay in a modest motel, we arrived at our first tourist destination, the Petrified Forest. All of us had been victims of our vivid imaginations, expecting petrified trees standing up like our living trees in Arkansas. Daddy, who was never easily impressed and didn't like to show it when he was, dubbed it the Putrefied Forest. But then, this is the man who, when we later visited the Grand Canyon, answered Mama's breathless question. "Well, Bud, isn't that wonderful? What do you think?" With, "Yep, mighty big hole." Then he turned and headed for the car. Daddy's traveling style was to set a daily timetable and to stick to it. So all we saw on the drive through Los Angeles was the freeway and the back of Daddy's head as he held a death grip on the steering wheel. Hopes of taking in the glamour of Hollywood and Beverly Hills were not to be. Sister and I recovered from that disappointment when we were dropped off at Mecca, otherwise known as Disneyland, left on our own to discover the magic. We were dizzied by repeated rides on the spinning teacups and the discovery of California boys. We were in preteen heaven. With Daddy's arrival goals and not much else on the agenda, we finally arrived at Uncle Joe's house, where we got acquainted with our cousins and the West Coast lifestyle. While the adults reminisced and laughed over adult beverages, the kids ate supper in the den. We had something wonderful and exotic called pizza pie. Daddy was relaxed and in rare form the next day when we all somehow fit into Uncle Joe's station wagon and set out for a day trip to San Francisco to visit Aunt Mayus's mother and aunts and to see the sights. Near the city center, the car came to a standstill and at the direction of dozens of highway patrol officers. Daddy hopped out and approached the group of officers lining the highway. We waited to get the scoop on the delay as we watched our good old boy Dad posing with his arms around two of California's finest, who were laughing at whatever BS he was telling them. He saluted his new friends and did an elaborate goose step back to the car. He reported to us that our trip was delayed by a high-ranking Soviet diplomat who was preceding Soviet Premier Khrushchev's visit later in September. Later in Chinatown, Dad bought a Chinese newspaper and parked himself against a lamppost. He became seemingly engrossed in reading the news of the day. An old gentleman circled him a couple of times, looked up at his ruddy Scots-Irish face, astonished, and asked in broken English, "You read Chinese?" Daddy drawled, "Oh, sure. I see there's a real important Russian fella that's in town preparing for Khrushchev's visit." The gentleman was impressed. Time to say goodbye came way too fast, and we hit the road again, this time taking the northern route home. Daddy entered trip mode and Mama entered her "the fun is over" funk at the same moment. The chemistry was explosive. He was determined to stop for nothing, and she was determined to let the good times play on. The result was an argument so hot it took Sister and me years to get over it. The conflict centered on Mama's insistence that we take a side trip to Yosemite and Daddy's insistence that we get home. The yelling went on for miles and got louder and louder when we covered our ears in the back seat. Then Mama went for all-out drama, opening the car door and threatening to jump while the car careened through curvy mountain roads. I still marveled that Daddy, a man not known for patience, refrained from swerving just a tiny bit more to eject his opponent. Either God answered our backseat prayers, or Dad realized if he returned to Arkansas minus a spouse, he would have a lot of explaining to do. Somehow the car door got closed with Mama still inside. Since Daddy held the steering wheel and therefore all the cards, we did not see Yosemite, and I never have. After driving endless miles through Kansas, we were hungry for the green hills of home. Daddy, Sister, and I voted to drive through the night while Mama pouted. Daddy had us girls sing with him to keep him awake for the rest of the trip. Finally, in the wee hours, with our heads full of the wonders of the West, we crossed the bridge into Little Rock. Daddy belted out a solo, something about when he was a little bitty baby rocking in a cradle in them old cotton fields back home. Gene Flake has been resident of Eureka Springs for the past 4 years. He's been writing for many years, but is yet to be published. That's coming, I'm sure. He is a past recipient of the Golden Pen Award from the Dallas Morning News. Gene has been involved in theater for many years and was director of theater for Unity Church in Dallas. During the past 2 years, he's directed 2 plays in Eureka Springs, and all proceeds from the productions have benefited local nonprofit organizations that include the Good Shepherd Humane Society and the Purple Flower, a domestic violence resource center in Carroll County. Gene is a longtime volunteer for the Good Shepherd Humane Shelter, and he does a weekly social media video titled Gene's Dogs. Please welcome to the stage for his first Homegrown Tales appearance, Gene Flake.
Thank you. I'm going to admit this is going to be really hard, but I'm going to get through it. I have for several years worked with dogs. It's something that I have a talent for. I've probably met thousands of them, and it's relatively easy for me to gain their trust. A little time, a little patience, calm demeanor usually works. Until Timmy. When we first met him, his name was not Timmy. His previous owners had named him Hot. Not an imaginative name, but the owners had very little consideration for his name. He was a breeder's stud, wanted only to create puppies, and he created beautiful puppies. He was a small Aussie with brown, tan, and white fur and distinctive blue eyes. The kind of Aussie you see romping and playing. The ones that are so cute you can't stand it. A lot of people will pay a high price for them. Unfortunately, Timmy never got to be a roaming, romping, beautiful puppy. For the first 4 years of his life, Timmy lived in a kennel and puppy pads, kept away from other dogs except to breed. No romping, no playing, very limited human interaction, no value except for the puppies he could churn out. This is the dark side of puppy breeding. This would have been his life if fate had not intervened. Somehow, Timmy sustained an injury to his hip that made it too painful for him to breed. His value now gone, his owners dumped him at the Dallas Animal Shelter rather than pay for treatment. He was picked up by a rescue group. That's where we first saw his picture. The rescue group showed a picture of him with the name Tiny Tim because of his limp. And it was near Christmas. We inquired about him on a Sunday morning and went to meet him that afternoon. When we first saw him, you would not know that he had blue eyes. His pupils were so dilated with anxiety they looked black. Huddled in a corner, head swiveling in all directions, watching the chaos of 7 other dogs barking and running, filled with people he did not know, looking like he just wanted to sink into the floor. And then he saw Deborah, my loving partner. Somehow he knew that Deborah was a safe space for him. He allowed her to put him on her lap. He did not relax, but continued swiveling his head at the chaos around him, but stayed in the safe place of Deborah's lap. We asked if we could walk him, and we were given a lead. When I put the lead on him, he pulled away. I doubt he'd ever been walked. When Deborah took the lead, he followed her, and he began his first walk. On the walk, we noticed that his head was still swiveling back and forth, and he was panting heavily. He was so incredibly anxious, he would only walk on the sidewalk or asphalt, tucking away at any attempt to get him on the grass. We then realized that at 4 years old, he did not know what grass was, and it terrified him. We took him back inside and told the rescue that we would take him. We just could not call him Tiny Tim. His journey as Timmy began. We had no idea what the journey would be. Coming home with him and bringing him inside, he immediately went to the farthest corner of the room, as far away from me as possible. He allowed Deborah to come near and did not seem to mind our other dog, Bandit. However, he kept his distance from me. With my experience with dogs, I did not believe it would take long, and how wrong that turned out to be. I took off his lead. He would not do his business, and unfortunately I had to chase him down and traumatize him even more to get inside. I had to lay down puppy pads near his food bowl. He would only eat if I left the room, and that was our routine for the next few days. When I could get close to him, I would reach out to touch and pet him, and he would look straight ahead, frozen in place, his little body tense, almost saying, "Please make him go away." As days and weeks went by, we realized he was not improving. The dog skills I believed I possessed had always taken minutes, hours, maybe a few days. With Timmy, it was now days, weeks, and months. There was only one thing to do, was put my ego aside and ask for help. We contacted a local dog behaviorist known as the Dallas Dog Whisperer. He came to our home, observed the interaction between Timmy, Deborah, and I, and spent time with Timmy alone. He reviewed his observations with us. In his opinion, Timmy had endured considerable trauma, probably from the male in his former home. My trying to take a hands-on approach only increased his anxiety. We came up with a new approach. Our new approach would have Deborah taking the more hands-on approach. I would not disappear, I would be present. However, I would not directly engage Timmy. It was no touch, no talk, no eye contact. The decision to engage was going to be up to Timmy. We started this plan and stuck to it for the next few weeks. We did see within the next few days a small change, small things. Timmy began to spend more time out of the corner sitting next to Deborah. At mealtime, we were able to put his food in the same room as us. He relaxed more on walks, starting to do his business on the grass instead of puppy pads. He still avoided me, and I did not force engagement. Then there came the event that changed everything. Timmy bit me. A dog bite is almost never a good thing, but this dog bite changed everything. It was my own fault. I broke the rules. No touch, no talk, no eye contact. I was getting Bandit and Timmy ready for their walk. Deborah was in the other room. I was sitting on the floor after clipping the lead on Bandit. I grabbed Timmy's to clip it onto him. Timmy jumped over to get away, and I tried to grab him. He bit my hand. I still have the scar. I got up, I walked away, and did not engage Timmy. When I calmed down, I walked back in. Timmy was cringing and hiding, expecting to be punished. I got a good look into what drove Timmy's fear, how terrifying his life must have been. I took Bandit's lead and said to Deborah, "Let's go." We went on our walk as if nothing had happened. That was the beginning of becoming Timmy. In the days and weeks that followed, there were small changes in Timmy's behavior. He began to look at me a little more. My not punishing him had changed his expectations. He's spending a little more time sitting near us. When I gave a treat to Bandit, he would edge closer as if to say, "Me too." He did not run and hide when I walked into a room. And one day, the magic moment happened. When a dog decides to trust, it is magic. Whatever happened in the past is discarded. This has happened to me many times. There's no better feeling. It's elating, it is loving, and it is sacred. From that moment on, the dog will trust you. The only being who can betray that trust is you. My moment with Timmy was small, but it was magic. I was coming down the hall. Timmy was coming the other way. He stopped in the middle of the hall, sat down, raised his paw, and he asked me to pet him. I admit, I had a difficult time controlling my emotions. Timmy had decided on his own to trust me. From that moment on, I would never betray him. As the years went by, he grew into the dog he was meant to be. He became Timmy. He became comfortable with strangers. In his quiet way, he would ask for affection. He learned to play. He loved being chased with one of his squeaky toys. He was always Deborah's boy, but I knew he loved his daddy. I would be in my office watching a show, and he would come in and he would sit on my feet for a few minutes. A little dad time. In the words of a friend's daughter, he was the softest, goodest boy. A few months ago, Timmy's body began to fail him. The old injury had given him arthritis, and it was difficult for him to climb the stairs. He spent a lot of time sleeping. He began to have difficulty breathing. It was slow at first, and then it accelerated. We had a vet visit, and it was not news we wanted to hear. His hip was worse, and an x-ray showed lungs full of cancer spots. At his age, surgery and chemo were really not an option. Over the next couple of weeks, he had to be carried. I can still see him looking at me, calmly accepting my picking him up to climb the stairs. All we could really do is keep him comfortable. The day came, and we knew it was time. We took him into our vet and gently let him leave this world. It's been a couple of weeks as I'm writing this. Timmy's presence is still here. I find one of his squeaky toys under a chair. There's one of his toys on the floor in my office. I cannot pick it up. While cleaning, I find some of his fur. I look down sometimes and feel him sitting on my feet. In the 7 years we had him, he went from an anxious and scared to sweet and loving, from nervous to confidence, from a dog who was never loved to a loving home. He got to be a dog. He became Timmy. He was the softest, goodest boy.
And here's Zeek again with another great story for us.
Thank you, Jean. That one got me. I told you earlier that I was going to read the first story that I ever read. I was invited to be on the Tales from the South show, a national public radio show, on the Tin Roof series. When I asked the producer, said, "This is a series that features prominent Southerners," and I thought, I didn't know I was one, but I said yes. She also told me that the show was a storytelling event, and I needed to write a story to tell. So I wrote my first story that day, and since this is our first time at this new venue, I thought it would be a good place to read it again. When I looked at my Facebook memories today, it was exactly 12 years ago on this date that I read this story for the first time. So here it is again. It's called Pierce. I was back home at my parents' house for spring break from the Memphis College of Art when I noticed the strange-looking gold hoops lying on the sink in the bathroom. They were perfectly round, about the size of a nickel, with an opening that had a gold ball on one end and a very sharp point on the other end of the loop. Next to the hoops was an introduction pamphlet that read, "Place the earrings on the lobe, leave in place, and the earrings will self-pierce in a matter of weeks." I then realized that they belonged to my mother, who was going to use the devices to finally get something that she had wanted for a long time, pierced ears. I laid the hoops back down in the sink and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and laced it with a shot of my daddy's Old Crow whiskey. My parents were away for the day visiting my Aunt Verlaine, and because I had my house to myself, I thought it'd be safe to have a little morning cocktail. I figured that my daddy wouldn't miss one shot of whiskey from the bottle that he kept hidden under the sink. He had bottles hidden here and there, in his sock drawer, in the shed out back, under the seat of his old truck, and several other places. He hid the bottles thinking my mother wouldn't know just how much he drank. She knew. If I was careful to get a little bit of whiskey from different bottles, he would never know that I had borrowed from his stash. As I sat there drinking the mixture of coffee and Old Crow, I was thinking about how happy I was to be enrolled in art school, a world so vastly different from the little Delta town in eastern Arkansas where I had grown up and where I had picked cotton each fall. Even though I felt at home in that little town of 650, I had never felt more comfortable than I did when I was with my fellow art students, a bohemian bunch who seemed to have a view of the world so unlike the Delta folks who I grew up with. I had found my tribe. There were a couple of guys at school, sophisticated boys from up north, who had pierced ears. I admired the roguish fashion statement, but I did wonder, when they were off campus, were they ever harassed and called sissy boys, or worse? It was a time long before it was socially acceptable for a man to wear an earring. As I sat there at the kitchen table, with my fingers, I traced the outline of the flowers on the plastic tablecloth, and I wondered how I would look with a pierced ear. Would I be brave like those boys from up north and wear an earring in public? I went to my daddy's sock drawer, found another bottle, and added a little more Old Crow to my coffee before returning to the bathroom. I placed one of the sharp-pointed earrings in my left lobe and lightly pressed. It hurt a little, but not enough to make me want to remove it. Even in the dimly lit bathroom, illuminated with a single light bulb, hanging about halfway down from a 13-foot ceiling, I could see that my earlobe was turning red. However, as I peered into the medicine cabinet mirror, I thought I looked dashing and debonair, a forward thinker, and one not restricted by the norms of society. I looked cool. My ear was smarting, but I saw no blood. I thought, oh, what the hell? It couldn't hurt much more than it does right now. I reached up with my right hand and pushed the pointed end of the earring on through my lobe and out the other side. I cussed and felt my knees in pain. Back on my feet again and peering into the mirror, I said out loud, well, I did it, and I'm glad as hell. I was thinking, I can't wait to get back to school to show off the shiny gold hoop to my friends. There was just one problem. In a few hours, my parents would return home, and I was worried about how they would react to my pierced ear. My earlobe had swollen to twice its normal size. I needed more whiskey. 17 years earlier, I had made the decision to become an artist. That year, I won the grand prize in the first grade art contest with a crayon portrait of my mother. I drew her hair in fabulous circles with a mahogany-colored crayon, and in the picture, I gave her almost perfectly round cheeks with a carnation pink crayon. As the winner, I had my choice of either a big old peppermint stick or a chicle stick, a peanut butter toasted coconut concoction of a stick. I chose the chickle stick and devoured my prize during the next recess. After winning the contest, there was never any doubt in my mind that I wanted to become an artist. My parents were accepting of whatever I did, not always understanding, but accepting, and that it included my desire to have a career in the arts. They at times would ask me, "Now how do you make money doing that?" Besides my career choice, they accepted without question or criticism other things that I had been doing my first year while in art school that seemed way off base to them, like letting my hair grow down past my shoulders, wearing raggedy bell-bottoms, wearing strange sandals imported from India, and refusing to eat meat. Neither did they understand my practice of transcendental meditation. After all, they were Methodists. While I was sitting at the kitchen table on that day during my spring break, I kept thinking that I may have gone a little too far this time with the ear piercing. Having a son wearing an earring just might be too much for them. I spent a long afternoon drinking more spiked coffee and being careful not to take too much whiskey from any one bottle. I thought the whiskey would calm my nerves, while the coffee would keep me somewhat sober. Ever so often, I went to the bathroom to look at myself and to admire my new look. At the same time, I was regretting my action. I doused my earring with rubbing alcohol, cussed some more of the stinging caused by the alcohol, and mostly I was just nervously waiting for my parents to return. Time seemed to crawl, and I got more anxious. My ear continued to throb. It was going on 4 o'clock when I heard a car drive up. There was no mistaking the smooth purr from the V8 motor of my mother's Chrysler station wagon. My parents were home. When they got out of the car, I peeked at them through the gingham curtains hanging above the kitchen sink. My parents were smiling, and they looked happy. That seemed like a good sign. With my courage bolstered by the old crow, I bravely awaited my fate as they came into the house. However, when the doorknob turned, I didn't feel so brave. I made small talk, asked about their visit while keeping my head turned at just the right angle so there would be no glint of gold. While my mother was setting her purse down on the table, she saw it. She tilted her head slightly to the side and gave it a little shake like people do when they see something not quite right. She straightened her head, and then, to my surprise, all that she said was, "How come you only pierced one ear?" My father didn't say a word. His silence continued for the next few days. On the last day of my spring break, my father and I were sitting in some lawn chairs out in the backyard under a mimosa tree. It was not that hot, but I could feel sweat running down my spine from the nape of my neck all the way down to my waistband and dampening my bell bottoms. I looked over at my father, who was as cool as a cucumber and wearing a very dressy straw yellow hat with a green hat band. When not in the house, he always had on a hat. He was also wearing an orange-flowered Hawaiian shirt. My father was a very large man, and he seemed even larger when wearing wildly colored shirts. But then, that was the only thing I can remember him ever doing that was outside of what I considered to be his safe zone. That day, he looked bigger than ever. I sat there on that green metal chair, getting hotter and more nervous by the minute. I was going back to Memphis that afternoon, and I could not leave without knowing what my father was thinking and feeling. He shifted a little in his chair, took a bottle from his back pocket, and took a swig of Old Crow. I couldn't stand it any longer. "Daddy, did you notice that I pierced my ear?" He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Yes, I saw the earring. It's your damn ear. You can do with it whatever you want to do." He continued, "There's a big world out there that I don't understand. You do. You need to do and should do whatever it takes to make you happy." I knew then that everything was going to be all right. Thank you. It's my honor to introduce our next reader, Linda Packham. Linda was born in St. Louis, but spent most of her growing-up years in the Kansas City area. Her girlhood was centered around horses and riding competitively. Linda attended the Kansas City Art Institute, where she developed a great appreciation for art history. The granddaughter of rural travelers, she loved to hear stories about their trips and learn about other cultures. She and her husband Robert lived in suburban Chicago for nearly 40 years, where they were active in community service projects, both at home and abroad. Although Linda and Robert's biggest adventure was raising 3 children who are now adult. In 2019, they moved permanently to Eureka Springs. A widow now, Linda keeps busy volunteering at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship and as a docent at the Museum of Eureka Springs Art. It is my honor to welcome Linda to the stage.
I begin my tale tonight about first encounter with Africa. And I begin it with an African proverb. Until the lion can write its own history, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. In the early 1900s, the suburban Chicago town where my husband and I lived forged a sister city relationship with a town in Ghana, West Africa. I'm proud to say it eventually became a decades-long journey in cultural understanding. When we first got started, our initial agenda was how to find common ground. Our Illinois city was a typical American bedroom community, fairly affluent by the standards of the rest of the world. And so, what could our African partner possibly contribute to the relationship? Our intentions were good, our interests sincere. However, I hesitate to use the word smug, but in retrospect, we were. Our group at the time was a committee of 7 residents. 3 of the members were elementary school teachers. We had the resources of our suburban town government and a modest budget. On the Ghanaian side, our liaison was a retired school district administrator with little funding beyond what she personally provided. But each side was genuinely eager to involve residents from both countries, and it seemed natural to connect through school children. We decided the best way to introduce the students to each other was to conduct an essay contest. The theme was A Day in My Life. It was a bit more daunting than we first thought to get together with the essay contest, and it took several months to organize. Communication was definitely a challenge. Our liaison did not have a telephone, and mail service was frustratingly slow and expensive. Our first group of essays came, of course, from a local school, dropped off by the principal on her way home. But our West African connection, it was a long wait before the packet from Ghana arrived. The large envelope had been made homemade from brown craft paper, edges held together with cellophane tape, one side covered with postage stamps and the other with a variety of customs inspection labels. We recruited 2 local librarians to be our judges. We sat around a conference table in our village hall. We first read through our local school children's essays. They were all discerningly similar. There was no plagiarism, but the young life experiences they were describing just seemed to all mush together. Their essays contained not so much descriptive sentences as lists, all written in scrawled, hurried handwriting. Get up, get dressed, eat breakfast, go to school, go home, play with friends, or go to some sort of lesson or sports team practice, go home, eat dinner, watch TV, do homework, go to bed. By the time we adults had finished reading those local essays, we were all feeling rather twitchy and a bit edgy. The local prize winner was one creative youngster who submitted her essay as a poster. She had cut illustrations of her various activities from magazines and pasted them in the shape appropriately of a giant circle. Then we opened the package from our Ghanaian students. Each child who participated had been given a single sheet of A4 paper. Paper was, and still is, a rather expensive commodity in that part of the world. The packet included penmanship that flowed in precise, unhurried strokes. There were straight, unwavering left and right margins with the space of 2 fingers as the indent to each new paragraph. Each sentence had a subject and a predicate. Nouns and verbs were graced with adjectives and adverbs to enhance description. The spelling was perfect, the punctuation was precise. And most delightful of all, each essay recounted a unique personal experience. I vividly remember 3 stories. One girl told of her parents waking up on her 12th birthday, greeting her with hugs and good wishes and blessings. The girl got up, ate breakfast, and then started to iron her school uniform, but dropped the iron on her foot. She cried out in great pain. Her frightened mother ran into the street and hailed a taxi, and they rushed to the clinic. The doctor treated her foot and told the little girl she should stay there for a while. Her mother left for work, but came back at noontime with an orange for the girl's lunch. The doctor sent them home, and the mother prepared a delicious family meal. After dinner, the girl's parents gave her a package wrapped in shiny paper. The little girl gingerly opened it, and inside, carefully folded, were several yards of the loveliest, softest pink fabric. Pink, her favorite color. And she was so excited, imagining the dress her mother would sew. It would be the most beautiful dress anyone could possibly dream of. Our committee members looked at each other. What 12-year-old girl in our town would be remotely satisfied with that kind of a birthday gift? And then there was the boy who spent his school vacation at his grandfather's small farm. He helped his father and his uncle harvest and process the cocoa pods. It was hard work, hot, sweaty labor. The muscles in his arms and hands ached. But in the cool night air, the boy sat with the men around a campfire and listened to them tell stories of bygone days. Our committee members looked at each other. What a priceless opportunity for 3 generations to connect and for the boy to learn about his family. Finally, there was a 9-year-old boy who told about the Saturday his father surprised him by awakening him in the very early morning, so early that there was mist still clinging to the ground. He followed his father up the ridges away from the house. He heard monkeys chattering in the distance. Occasionally they saw a startled bird that had taken flight when they pushed aside a low-hanging tree branch. They walked up and up and up a stony path until the sun beat down very hot. At last they'd reached a clearing at the top of the highest hill. His father bent down and lifted him up onto his shoulders. The little boy looked down from the ridge, over the tops of the trees, over the roofs in the town, onto the beach, then the fishermen rowing out to sea. He looked out across the water, far out all the way to the horizon line. And sitting on his father's shoulder, the little boy thought surely he could see the entire world. Our committee members looked at each other once again. Whatever doubt we had expressed about our African partners' ability to contribute was swept away. Because those pieces of paper, those essays sent from the other side of the planet, from a place that we had foolishly labeled as impoverished, informed us of the riches that our own town had in very short supply. Time to be together, to cherish the past, and to dream about the future.
Let's hear it again for our guest speakers. They both did a fabulous job. And I'm so happy to see all of you here at our new venue, and we're delighted to be here too. Big thank you to the Gravel Bar, to Ethan and Dave for letting us be here. It's fabulous. And now here is my co-producer, Sandra, who will tell you about our next show.
I hope we can see all of you and bring a couple friends too next time, which will be August the 5th, that's a Wednesday, at 5 o'clock. And our guest storyteller will be Tom Flynn. The guest musician is a local favorite, Shane Causey. So hope to see you here again. Thank you for coming.
You've been listening to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at the Gravel Bar, 216 West Van Buren in Eureka Springs. Join us again next time for more Homegrown Tales.